Billy Napier and the Florida Gators hit a home run hiring Joe Houston to run special teams. We're going to talk about that here on Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast and Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Happy Tuesday. I am Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Giants Country, NFL 33. Find me in Mobile at the Senior Bowl this week, because that's where we're living. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers join today. You'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And today's episode is going to be a little bit different because I went out and Florida hired Joe Houston to run their special teams unit. I went out and I found two players that were coached by Joe Houston, and we're going to hear what they think. First, we're going to go with, Toledo. You guys know I'm a Toledo alum. We're going to go to Toledo, where Joe Houston coached in 2015, and we're going to be joined by Jameson Vest, who was Toledo's kicker at the time. Joining me now for Locked On Gators is Jameson Vest, who I think that most of my listeners know by now that I went to Toledo as well. We had slight overlap there. And so actually finding a way to connect Florida and Toledo is personal championship victory here. But when you were a freshman at Toledo in 2015, Joe Houston was on the staff as well. And now Florida has hired him to be the senior special teams analyst, and he's going to run the special teams unit for Florida. So I was just curious, with your experience, I know it was just a year, but with your experience there, what is Joe Houston like as a coach?
Well, he's definitely not your typical coach. He is, pretty straightforward when he needs to be, but he also knows when to be more of a guy's guy and allows his players, whether they're a position player that's playing on special teams or they're the specialist, kicker, punter, long snapper, letting them do their own thing in terms of their preparation and how they handle themselves from a day-to-day basis. Very laid-back approach, but also with, a little bit of fire under him. He's very passionate, and you can see that when he's in the field, when he's in the box, and the guy just loves the ball. But very, very motivational and just loves to be there.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned motivational, because I also spoke to Steven Wirtel, who was a long snapper for Iowa State under Joe Houston as well. And that was something that he mentioned, was that he's like, hey, he actually gets guys like pumped to play special teams, and that's not always an easy thing to do. So is that kind of one of his things where that's a big selling point for him, is actually getting guys ready to go? Because not everybody's built to do it. Not even just specialists, but just actually playing gunner, whatever it may be. Not everyone's built to play special teams. And so is that maybe a hidden thing for Joe Houston to actually get guys ready to go for it?
Without a doubt. He's able to watch film of somebody playing offense and defense and just kind of point out, like, hey, he would be a great gunner for us, like you mentioned, or he'd be a great edge protector on field goal block, or, whatever the case is. He can take somebody's position skill set and translate that into a special teams unit, not just from seeing what they can do on offense or defense, but he can also mold them and teach them the proper techniques as well. That was something that was very noticeable when he was at Toledo.
Yeah, and being that you were a kicker at Toledo and Joe Houston was a kicker at USC when he was playing, I wanted to know, how did he kind of help you get ready? Because when you were at Toledo with Joe Houston, it was your freshman season, and you were Toledo's kicker all 4 years there. You were I mean, it's you or Jeremiah Detmer for the Toledo GOAT at kicker there. So how did Joe Houston kind of play into your personal development as a kicker?
So just for a little bit of context, when I was coming into Toledo, I had never played a season of football where I was just the kicker. I'd always played other positions. I was used to being on the field almost every play of the game, depending on what year of high school or prior to that you look at.
You were a QB, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And Joe was fully aware of that. And he knew that that's probably where I needed to grow the most, especially my first year. And he really gave me a blueprint on how to operate as a kicker, both physically and mentally, and just how to appreciate being a kicker in general. Because it's a very, I don't want to say undervalued position, but it's not looked at as the quarterback, and that was a big mental shift for me. So he really taught me how to appreciate the position, how it can be very humbling at times, but also how to enjoy it too. So he catered to my specific needs, and I think that's where he really excelled, because he did that with a lot of our other players as well. And also, to add a little bit of context, Brian Gasser, who's the special teams coordinator, shout out Gass, he was a big proponent of me and Joe working together, because he reached out to me coming into my freshman year, which most special teams coordinators don't do this, but he asked me who would I want to have, or if I had a position coach, who would I want it to be? And he gave me a list of 3 names, and Joe was on that list. And I knew Joe from prior years, going to training camps and all sorts of stuff like that. I was like, I don't know Joe that well, but I know him more so than anybody else on that list. And they pulled the trigger and hired him. And Joe called me 2 days later and was like, "Hey man, I'm coming to Toledo," and I was pumped. So
that's actually why I didn't know that part of it, that they gave you the list and they were like, all right, pick a guy, and that's how it happened. That's actually an insane way to go about it with a true freshman kicker.
Yeah, and I think that goes to show the awareness, of situational awareness of Coach Gasser. He's not a former specialist. He was a special teams coordinator, knew a lot about the different units, but didn't know much about kicking and punting. And he was aware of that. He wanted to bring somebody in that could help out with the specialist alongside being an analyst for the special teams units. So,
yeah, that's a great one. And I did want to ask you before I let you go, just what did you think of his approach to practicing special teams? I know that some teams, there's limited reps to go around there at special teams, especially when you do have guys who are starters on offense. They're not going to be there for the entire special team window, or you can't really be off to the side working with those guys. So just what did you think of Coach Houston's approach to practicing special teams and kind of nailing down the details? Because for Florida, that was a huge issue that they had in 2023. It was whether it was not having the proper number of players on the field, not having guys where they should be, not communicating who should be blocking where. So for Florida, the details were, that's like devil's in the details, and it certainly was for Florida this past year.
Yeah. No, I think it goes back to just him getting people pumped to play special teams, like you mentioned earlier. Some of that stuff goes by the wayside, and I think it's just a result of the prioritization of other things. A lot of coaches, especially head coaches, they're going to prioritize more than likely offense or defense over special teams. And that's just the way it goes. Joe has a good way of navigating that and getting the head coach to understand, hey, this is what we need, and this is what we need to focus on. And they've obviously trusted him everywhere he's been.
That was Jason Candle's first year, right? Matt Campbell was already at Iowa State at that time.
Nope. No, that was Campbell's last year.
Campbell's last, and then he took Joe Houston with him, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That was a heartbreaking time for me as a Toledo. That point just now.
You and me both. That was a shock, but the 3 years spent with Candle were also a lot of fun. I enjoyed that as well. So.
Oh yeah, hey, I mean, could argue. I don't even think you could argue it that Toledo's gone up since then, and was not the expectation. I kind of thought the world was ending when Campbell took the job with Iowa State, but hey, it worked out. But thank you so much, Jameson, for taking the time to talk with me about Joe Houston. I very much appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem. Appreciate you, Brandon. Let me know if you need anything.
Happy Super Bowl week to all who celebrate, and well, you can celebrate with me. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And if you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch. I like an end seat. I like to be able to have my arm up on the rest. Just saying. Grabbing your favorite football snacks, placing some super bets. The specials are ridiculous every year for the Super Bowl. It's awesome. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I mean, look, when you look at 49ers and you look at Chiefs, no one really likes the teams, but going to be a lot of money-making opportunities. I'm going to say that one. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or 3 or 4. I'm just saying, hey, make your money however you want to make your money. I'm going to make mine on FanDuel. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook of the NFL. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free reviews in the podcast. And thank you again to Toledo's Jameson Vest. And now we're going to go, because we're going chronologically. 2015 with Toledo, we're going for the next 4 years where he was at Iowa State under Matt Campbell still. And we're going to go to Steven Wirtel, who is Iowa State's long snapper, then is in the NFL currently, to talk about this Joe Houston hire. Joining me now for Locked On Gators is an Iowa State Cyclone, a Patrick Manley finalist, Senior Bowl alum.
Yeah.
Maybe the greatest cup pong player I've ever played in Steven Wirtel. And Steven, now you were at Iowa State for your career, and you did have Joe Houston there, who Florida recently hired Joe Houston to. He's listed as their senior special teams analyst, but he's going to be running the special teams unit.
Mm-hmm.
What was your experience working with Joe Houston?
Yeah, I think, Joe, first of all, he's an awesome human being and a great coach. And I think the best part about Joe is he's a great players coach. And, being around Iowa State, and being around Joe, he really, he was up there leading our special teams, leading the meetings and everything. And, you can feel his passion for special teams, and, you can see his knowledge as well, and kind of what he knows. And, this was a couple of years ago, and obviously Joe went on to go to Alabama and, was with the Patriots for a little while. So I'm sure he was able to even gain more knowledge. But, it was so cool to be around Joe, because you knew what he was teaching you was right, and his knowledge for it was also, very good at that time. And, just his ability to interact with the players and really get them to buy into special teams and love special teams. I think that was huge for us here. And, obviously for him to go on and do that at Alabama. And, I got to actually run back into Joe again when I was at the NFL Combine, and he was with the Patriots at the time. But, just sitting down and talking to him, and, just really happy for him. And, I expect him to bring that, ability to Florida to teach the kids and to really have them buy into special teams and love special teams. And, hopefully that can reflect for that on Saturdays for them.
Yeah. And so in your experience, what makes a special teams coach, or at Iowa State for a year, he was the special teams coordinator, what makes a special teams coach a good special teams coach? Because it's also, honestly, it's probably the least known about area in all of football. So just for the fan perspective, what makes a special teams coach good at that? Because for Florida, we had so much just miscommunication was the big thing in 2023, where multiple times you weren't getting all 11 guys out on the field. There were people just straight up not handling their assignments. So what makes Joe Houston a good special teams coach?
Yeah, I think it comes back to his ability to get those players to buy in and really understand the importance of special teams. And, it's such a huge phase of the game that can, win or lose you some games. And, I think Joe's just his attention to detail will be big for, having 11 on the field, but, just his ability to really just allow those, players at Florida to really understand the importance of special teams. And, he did such a great job of that at Iowa State. And, just his ability to, show up every day and those kids, one thing for them to understand is that Joe's going to love each and every one of them. And he just loves special teams so much. So I think just his ability to, continue to show those kids how much special team means to the game and to him, it's the type of guy that they want to play for. And, anytime they go on the field, you should not want to, mess up for Joe because he puts so much time and effort into it that, the kids should just go out there every opportunity they have, and no matter the phase of the game or whatever, and really just put forth their best effort because Joe's going to put them in the best situation to succeed.
Yeah, I think bringing in the guy that Bill Belichick of all people was like, hey, he can coach on my special teams unit. I think it's a pretty good indicator that probably pretty good at that. I was curious also, what was his approach to practicing special teams with Iowa State? Because we know that there's some schools that practice it for one window of the day or whatever it is. There's only so many reps to go around and only so much time that can be committed to it, especially when you have guys who start on offense or defense playing special teams. So just what was Joe Houston's approach to it at Iowa State when you were there?
Yeah, I think the first thing though that I think should make Florida fans happy is Joe has was the kicker at USC and has a background in kicking. So I think when you can get a coordinator or someone around a special teams unit that has done it, has kicked, because being a kicker, punter, and snapper, those are three unique positions that when you can put someone in a position to lead those kids that has done that, at a great school like USC and it has done it at the college level, I think that's huge for their specialists in general. So, I think that's something that should hopefully make those fans happy that they have a guy there that can help those kids because it's such a unique craft. But going to practice, what I remember with Joe was, we would get 2 special teams periods at Iowa State in practice and a walkthrough, pre-practice. But I think the best thing about Joe is his energy, in those periods. The periods here were about 6 minutes long, but it was to the point. And, Joe's energy in those periods, was something that was kind of contagious that the kids would feed off of. You have especially in the middle of practice, some guys are tired, but, Joe was always going to bring that juice and that energy. And, I think that really reflected well here at Iowa State because, you get into that period and, you would feed off that energy and really just do your job. And, even going back to the meetings, Joe did a really good job of just, laying out what's going to go on that day at practice, going over the drill work. So everyone understood in those meetings. So when you got to practice, there was no wasted time and you can just get right to what needs to be worked on that day. So I think Joe did such a great job of that, to where right when you got to the practice field, there weren't any questions. Everyone understood what was going on and they all just did their job. And I think that allows you to not waste a second, especially in special teams, because you get so limited time and those kids can just go out there and perfect their craft. And Joe allows you to do that.
And before I let you go, I did want to ask, how did he help you personally develop? Because, he kicked, you're a long snapper. And from your time at Iowa State, you were one of the best long snappers in the country. I mean, Patrick Manley, finalist your final year. You were at the Senior Bowl as one of the 2 long snappers that they had here. You were, I think, one of the most athletic long snappers of all time based on testing times. We talked about that quite a bit that year that you were going through the draft process.
Yep.
So how did he personally help you develop from a technical aspect of playing special teams, whether it's long snapping or just pursuit after the snap?
Yeah, I think just the ability for Joe to understand what being a specialist is like. It's just different. For someone that's gone through it, it's huge when you can talk to someone because I know he understands what being a specialist is like, and the fact that you may only have 8 or 12 plays a game or whatever, and you're really under a microscope every time you go out there. So just really talking to Joe and having him, kind of share what he went through at USC or anything along the lines. But, Joe knows the craft. He's been around, guys that have, punted, kicked, or snapped. And now even at the highest level, he's been around guys, with the Patriots. So it's like, I'm sure, Joe's like a sponge. He takes everything in, gets a lot of good ideas and really understands the craft of it. So, the specialists there at Florida should be thrilled to get him. And I just know from my time here, like just sitting down with Joe, even talking about life beyond football, he's a really good resource and a guy that I even stay in touch with to this day. But he really understands the fine details of kicking, punting, and snapping, and a lot of those kids, like, hey, if something went wrong in practice or even just, studying film after a game or practice, they're able to really just break it down and fine tune the little pieces that go into becoming, a great specialist. And Joe will do that for for those guys at Florida. And, I think it's something that they should be really thrilled to have leading their special teams.
Thank you very much, Steve. Appreciate the time.
No problem. Anytime.
We spend a lot of time talking together. You and I, we get fired up together on wins and losses, who starts, who sits, who's hired, who's fired or not fired. I'm thankful for that connection we have. And today I want our chat to be just a little bit more personal, whether you're on extended travel, bracing for a major weather event, or limited by yet another supply shortage. You are indeed covered, my friend. Thanks to our partners at Jace Medical, life-saving antibiotics and a long list of daily medications can be ordered in a 1-year supply. Go online right now at jacemedical.com to receive your 12-month supply on all of your daily medication. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. If you or someone you love would like to get some peace of mind by having a year supply of any daily med, go to jacemedical.com and see if it's offered for you. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day, every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast. And thank you again to Jameson Vest and Steven Wirtel to talk about Joe Houston. Look, I'm a fan of the hire. I was a fan before that. And then after talking to them, I'm an even bigger fan. But moving forward to this week in Mobile, today is the first day of Senior Bowl practices. And if you don't know what the Senior Bowl is, it's where the best upperclassmen in the country all meet and play a game in Mobile, Alabama. They have 3 days of practices. Every NFL team shows up to this. A bunch of NFL coaching staffs are kind of plucked here and there to have assistants coaching position groups, and basically everyone's getting a promotion for the week. And in doing so, Florida has 2 players here this year. First off is Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver, who, of course, everyone knows and loves. And for me, I think that receivers winning these one-on-ones is an important part of, it's an important opportunity that you get, because it's really not easy to do that consistently, especially when you're going up against so many talented defensive backs. And especially this year, there's a ton of defensive back talent in Mobile, which for me, looking at Ricky Pearsall, I'm like, that's an even better chance to improve his draft stock. He is a slippery route runner. And one thing that he actually measured in yesterday morning, and he came in bigger than I thought he was going to be listed as, because so often you see guys like Xavier Leggett with South Carolina. It was listed at 6'4" or 6'3", and came in measured at 6'1" at the Senior Bowl. Ricky Pearsall, I thought, was going to measure in at a shade under 6 feet. Instead, he's 6 foot and 7/8 of an inch. So he's just under 6'1", which again is taller than I thought he would be. And so for me, I think you win by not being listed poorly on the Florida Gators website or by the coaching staff, whatever it may be. You win by being accurately reported there. Then you show up to an opportunity where you do get to shine. There's plenty of talented quarterbacks in Mobile this week. So you're going to be tested in straight up press man coverage by a lot of these corners, because that's what a lot of the one-on-ones are. It's press man or off man, but it's man coverage there. And for Ricky Pearsall, you're going to be working wide open, because a lot of it is just straight up one-on-ones. There's nobody over the middle that you have to worry about. And you're going to see circus catches. But for Ricky Pearsall, he has an opportunity to kind of distance himself and work a wider route tree than we've seen. Because when Anthony Richardson was the starting quarterback at Florida, a lot of passes were inaccurate and it kind of limited what Ricky Pearsall could show off as an actual receiver. And then you look at this past season and Graham Mertz was exponentially better as a passer. However, deep downfield was not something that they targeted frequently. So this week, when you have as many talented quarterbacks as you have in Mobile, Ricky Pearsall gets to run those routes against talented defensive backs, downfield vertically, whether he's working inside, outside, in the slot, out wide. He gets to be used in a variety of ways. And NFL teams, again, 32 NFL teams, every single one of them will be represented this week in Mobile. And Ricky Pearsall gets to work out in front of all of them and interview with all of them. So this is a big week for Ricky Pearsall to kind of, I think he's a day two player on film. I think he gets to solidify himself as a day two receiver with strong workouts, strong one-on-one drills, and strong interviews, which again, he's going to get the opportunity to speak to every NFL team this week. So that's a big plus for him. And then you look at Kingsley Eguakun, who, look, I've very openly been critical of what Kingsley has put on film throughout his time in Gainesville. I think that he was average as a blocker. However, he had far too many penalties, both pre-snap and during the snap, in between the whistles, that for me were just an absolute killer. And that's where I kind of struggle with really being bought in too much on Kingsley Eguakun to really be a proven NFL player. But he's here because NFL teams want to see him. NFL teams want to speak to him. He dealt with injuries all year this season. I believe he only played in 4 games, and even then he barely played. He dealt with injuries all year and played through them. And NFL teams are going to like that because, of course, your film's going to be bad, but you're a warrior at that point. But he's also coming in with he's got average height, below average weight, below average hand size, average arm length, but a huge wingspan. He's got one of the biggest wingspans in Mobile, especially for a center. He's got a 92nd percentile wingspan for just all centers at the NFL Combine in the past 25 years. So he's got good measurables, or at least decent measurables, and that wingspan is going to help him. And NFL teams are going to be interested in bringing him in because he's an experienced center that's played at the SEC level. And again, if you can fix the penalties, which weren't all his fault. Like, you look at the Kentucky game from 2021 when it was Dan Mullen's last season, and Kingsley Eguakun had a lot of penalties in that game alone. That's not entirely on him, because you do have to look at Dan Mullen and that coaching staff for not adapting and going to a silent count earlier. So it's not all on Kingsley. However, this is an opportunity for Kingsley to show that he's improved there, which he didn't really get the opportunity to show this year because he barely played. But here they're going to be working hard counts. They're going to be working frequently. And you might even see him, maybe he tries playing at guard a little bit. Maybe that's something that we watch him do. So I think Kingsley is someone that can really help himself because, one, I don't think his draft stock is very high right now at all. But 2, getting the opportunity to speak to all 32 teams, he's an experienced center. Like, he's going to have good, he's probably going to interview well. He's an experienced center. If you've improved on some things, if you've gotten better, and if you're finally healthy, now is a good selling point to go, hey, like, maybe you do consider me earlier on day 3. Like, maybe I am someone that you think can fit into your plans early on in your offense, and maybe I could be a stopgap kind of player there. So I do think that Kingsley Eguakun has a lot to gain this week as well, and I think that Kingsley especially has very little to lose because, again, I don't think that his stock is high right now. So to be able to get the opportunity to show what he can do in front of all 32 teams, I think you could argue that he's got the biggest room to grow compared to how little he can fall at this point. So I think Kingsley can be a big winner when it's all said and done here. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow talking more Florida Gators football. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Giants Country NFL 33, and I'll see you all tomorrow.